So the idea that I want to share with you is, I think, quite a simple one. It's to teach sustainable development in schools and give young people authority over local planning decisions. So to do that, I'm proposing that landscape architecture be added as a school-taught subject to the national curriculum at key stages 1 to 4. So that's right through from primary school to GCSE level. The subject would build upon the nature-based practical approach currently used in forest schools and nurseries, through to more advanced studies into ecology, social economic sciences and design, and then into planning and development at key stages 3 to 4. This new subject would include modules that specifically educate on the relationship between climate change and the built environment. And teaching would focus on solutions that planning and design can offer. At key stage 4, or GCSE level, students can elect to join the school planning panel. This would be a body of students at each school who have authority to affect the outcome of local planning decisions. So before rerouting into landscape architecture, I worked in the Planning and Environment Department of a local authority. I spent a lot of time dealing with public correspondence in that role, responses either by letter or on the phone to queries, questions, and complaints about a variety of matters, from potholes and hedge cutting to town centre regeneration schemes. Alongside this, I attended the planning committee meetings, where members of the public came to be heard regarding local planning decisions. However, in both the written correspondence, as well as in the meetings, those who I spoke with didn't seem to be fully representative of the general public. And one particular group of people who were significantly underrepresented were young people. It strikes me as a problem that those who will inevitably be most affected by decisions being made are not part of the planning system. But that doesn't mean that young people don't care about local development. There is a golf course close to where I live that in January became the focus of a local Extinction Rebellion group. The group came to the golf course to protest that the lease that was due to expire at the end of March not be renewed by the local council. The lease was taken on by another golf club and the site remains a course. But in between the protests in January and the recent reopening of the course, lockdown happened. During this period, the golf course became an entirely different place, suddenly open to the public and filled with walkers, bikers and children who inadvertently reimagined what this place could be as they raced their bikes down the fairways and built sandcastles in the bunkers. The turnout for the Fridays for Future school climate strikes has also been astounding, as has the Teach the Future campaign, led by students lobbying for a climate emergency education bill, which they've had to write themselves. To see the ingenuity and authority already demonstrated here shows that there's an earnest desire, as well as a legitimate concern among young people to make change. And this is where the school planning panel comes in. It could be that prospective applicants for significant development proposals would need to engage with the school at the pre-application stage. Within their planning statement, they should demonstrate how the panel has influenced the proposal they put forward. Or more radically, the planning applicant could be required to contact the school's panel, who would then investigate the application and produce a statement recommending to either approve or reject the proposal. This statement would then form part of the mandatory document submitted as part of the planning application. Of course, in order for the panel to be effective, students will first need the education necessary to support this idea and get them to a stage where they can be confident participants in such a panel, with a credible seat at the table. Already there are many relevant topics in the national curriculum, which is great. For example, GCSE Geography is already teaching about how human intervention can adversely affect the environment. Even at key stages 1 and 2, pupils are learning about economic trade routes and the consumption of natural resources. But despite this, only 4% of students feel that they know a lot about climate change. So in order to educate and empower students to engage, new material needs to be added to the syllabus. This could be anything from additional topics to a whole new course, something more practical and project-based than what's already being taught. For example, in geography, pupils learn how to research, collect, and evaluate information about the world around them. But in this new course, which for now I will call landscape architecture, pupils will learn how to transform this information into practical application. So there are already similar educational programs being developed in countries such as Italy and New Zealand. This year, every school in New Zealand will be equipped with educational material about the climate crisis, written by the country's leading science agencies. A report states that this will include tools for students to plan their own activism and to process their feelings of eco-anxiety. Another tool in the curriculum helps students create and carry out an action plan on certain environmental issues. Other similar examples are the green schools currently in New Zealand, South Africa, and Bali. These schools, literally without walls, put sustainability and eco-care first. They say, we educate for sustainability through community-integrated entrepreneurial learning in a natural environment. Our holistic, student-guided approach inspires and empowers our young people to be green leaders. The green school way of learning allows young people to thrive by learning in a purposeful manner. Learning how to be a change maker and have a positive impact on the world ignites children's passion to learn. And there are similar ideas being trialled at schools in London. Last week, I spoke to Ben, an outdoor education coordinator who works with a primary school in Wandsworth, using PPA time to teach growing your own, connecting with nature, and upcycling. PPA stands for Planning, Preparation and Assessment, and this time is set aside during school hours for teachers to do their support work. These time slots are covered by teachers like Ben and create an opportunity to experiment with new methods of teaching and new course content, and could be a route into testing a new subject such as sustainable development or landscape architecture. By having the school planning panel, as well as bringing climate change and sustainable planning into the curriculum, there will be benefits for the pupils. This idea seeks to support the next generation to be educated, engaged, and empowered to change the world around them. A problem with the current planning system is that those who seek to influence decisions are often the older generation, who more often than not will not benefit from the development that is being considered. Therefore, anything that can encourage younger people to input into the system has to be a positive thing. It also gives pupils an opportunity to get outside and experience the world around them. It creates opportunities for project-based and self-directed learning. And it promotes a sense of care and respect between people and nature from a young age. Generally, in order to love something and care about something, we first need to develop a relationship with it. Which brings me on to benefits for the planet. Bringing climate change to the forefront of mainstream education will have a positive global impact. If we educate young people on the relationship between planning and environment, and then allow them to use that knowledge to affect decisions, we give them an opportunity to challenge development that comes at a cost to the environment. My notion is that young people who have been sufficiently educated in the climate crisis will choose to prioritise the environment over economy. Like local planning decisions, climate change conversations are currently dominated by a fairly homogenous group of people. But bringing those conversations into mainstream education widens the pool of creative thought in tackling the climate crisis, which is needed if we're going to create a sustainable future for everyone. My hope is that by giving young people the opportunity to engage in local planning and design, we will end up with places that are not only more sustainable, but also more playful and creative and interesting. And opening up these opportunities to all the diversity of pupils in mainstream education will result in more diverse places.
Brilliant. That was really great. I'm going to invite on your sounding panel. Can you hear me okay? I've just changed to a giant headset to help with my sound.
I can hear you.
Great. Excellent. So forget fashion. Here we go. I'm going to bring on your sounding panel. I couldn't agree more about educating some change makers. I think it's a brilliant idea. And gosh, that was quite shocking seeing the planning laid out that way, seeing the kind of makeup and lack of diversity. I'm really pleased to welcome Aminah Ricks, who's the founder of Future Planners, really dear to her heart, education and outreach. So great to have you. I'm also inviting up Kat Drew from the Design Council, Chief Design Officer. I know Design Council does a lot of education and outreach in schools, so I'm sure very strong things to say. I'm welcoming back Romy Rawlings, who you guys met this morning from Vestre, again, a landscape architect. I know she'll be thrilled to get landscape on the agenda. Pamela Smith from the National Trust, of course, a huge part of what they do is trying to bring people to their sites. And a huge part of that is the great outdoors, of course, and a developer, because we always need a big bad developer, but we don't have a big bad one. We've got Jonny Anstead, so from town. So definitely at Marmalade Lane and other sites, landscape's really at the heart of that, and children are at the heart of that. But education, I don't know if you do any of that, Jonny.
I think it sort of does itself.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to kick off though with Aminah, because I think this is a really, really in one of your sweet spots. So it'd be great to hear from you.
Great. Thank you. Rebecca, first I want to say thank you for your presentation, for this idea. I think that this is it's unfortunate actually that this is seemingly new, and because thinking about children and their impact in cities is something that I think we've been remiss with worldwide. My work with children happens to happen in the US and also in Europe. And I can confirm that a program like yours I haven't seen, and I wish and hope that we can see it sooner. So I actually have some tidbits too that I want to share with you towards the end of my feedback. But I think the most important connection that you've made for all of us is to help understand that bridge between children and city planning and actually having them have a voice. What happens, unfortunately, is it's always a top-down paradigm where there are people in an office at a computer with the best of intentions who are designing for cities. And typically when they think of cities, they think of adults, which is a misnomer. If you look at Arup's study that they produced last year called Cities Alive, by 2030, I believe the majority of world's urban populations will be kids. And so if we don't start including them in the process, we've done a disservice not only to them, but to future generations. And so I love this idea where you're talking about starting from a very young age, because I think what happens, you're talking about like stage 1, which I believe in England is between 5 and 7 years old. And I work with kids starting even as young as 4. And I can tell you even things like participatory budgeting for children, which a lot of adults might think, oh, kids can't understand that, they can't be involved. Couldn't be further from the truth, because I've had students come up to me and say, if I had the budget, I would want to do this in the schools, or this with the landscaping, or this with an empty lot. And that's from anywhere from Brooklyn to Kosovo, where my work has taken me. I did want to just point out a couple of things that might be helpful, like moving forward, things for you to consider. There's a group that maybe you've heard of. They're called the EU Metamorphosis Project. And they have done things such as in Zurich, they've done a neighborhood analysis, and they've taken that work, and over this, I think over the course of a couple of months, this happened a couple of years ago, they actually had really young kids from ages 6 to 12 present their findings in front of local council members. And so even though they're not, registered voters, they are young citizens. And I think it was great not only for the council members to hear that from the mouths of children, but I think it's really great for the kids. You're talking about engagement, and what better engagement than to have kids actually speak in front of, you had that nice picture of all of those players speaking in front of the people who I think have the power to make change. Also, I think that this plan is very thoughtful, because you showed us from all the different ages between forest school, which I'm familiar with, all the way through to design as they get older, so that it becomes something that they metabolize. And it's not this extraneous separate thing, but it's something that's a part of their everyday school. They're doing math. Why not, landscape architecture includes so many things that they're already studying. Like you had the example of, geography, but sort of taking it to the next step. And I think also that it's sustainable, because it's just a matter of getting the schools and the education boards to open up their ideas to this. Once it's there, then it becomes part of the curriculum. I've tried in Italy, I've tried in New York to make just urban planning a part of the educational process, to very small success, only in that they've allowed me in during the school day to interrupt the regular school activities to bring in some urban planning things. But I love your idea, because it's much higher level. You're saying that the whole educational field should include this. And so look me up on futureplanners.city, and we can keep this conversation going. I really would like to be a part of helping make something like this come true. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Aminah. That was an amazing resource of both other links and also feedback. I'm going to jump to you, Pam, because I think it'd be interesting to get the perspective, from your work in the National Trust, perhaps a bit more looking at what will draw people in. I mean, this is about kind of education properly in the system, but I think you're often looking to educate. Are you on mute? I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Sorry, here we go again. Awkward. Yeah, thanks for that. I really like the big overview, and it's an answer really to the fact that we talk about young people having responsibility for where they live, but we don't give them responsibility to be part of the decisions. And I think anything that introduced people to the fact that environment is something we should be responsible for and part of, and it's not something that's done to you, is really key. And obviously, hopefully that's a captive and target audience, people during their school life. I like the fact you picked up on a lot of the pros and cons, and the fact that getting anything on the curriculum is really hard. And actually there's a lot of subjects that a lot of people say already cover it, but we know without the resource and the support they don't. We're trying to do a lot more inclusive landscapes in National Trust, and very much about family audiences. And what we found about people engaging is that sometimes you just have to give people a helping hand to help them access things. So in the National Trust, we have a project called 50 Things to Do Before You're 11 3/4. And it's a book with stickers, and it's almost like an I Spy manual. It's everything to look out for as you visit places. And I can imagine that working in local towns as well. I know here in Birmingham, I've been involved with the Architecture Centre that was made and created partnerships doing school work. And once you get into the schools, the teachers are really engaged, but it's recognising that the confidence within the teaching community. So as the Landscape Institute or Chartered Institute of Horticulturalists, how do we actually get involved in that? And the National Trust is working a lot more with urban places. So the idea is you don't have to be a member, you don't have to visit a National Trust property to understand why it's important. So we're working in urban schools. I've got a meeting tomorrow at Moseley Well Bass, for example. So I do think it's hard to actually focus on efforts to get things in the curriculum. I know there's lots of resource out there, and perhaps it may take some time to see what's available and what worked and what didn't, and to get back in touch with the architecture centres, perhaps with some of the resources the Design Council now hold from How Places Work and all of those, and see if we can actually get back to some of those schools who were participating in the past. I know driving past secondary schools around here, they have big signs saying that they're an arts college or they're a specialist science college. Wouldn't it be great to see on those signs that they're an environment school, that's their focus for all their teaching? I do know there's a couple of organisations. There's one called TIDE, which is Teachers in Development Education. So the website's tidec.org, and they have a wealth of resources that they're trying to encourage schools to use for sustainable development. And it's worldwide. It's actually based in Birmingham, but it's a worldwide organisation. And there's so many resources I know are out there, and so many skills that haven't linked up with their sort of library of resource. So I just think it would be great, particularly I was brought up in the countryside, and I've lived in the city for the last 30 years. And I think all the advantages of the city, this could be about, rather than saying, isn't it a shame we live in a city? Isn't it a shame we bring up children in a city? It's not, isn't it great we can bring up children in a city and what all that means? So, yeah, equally, please keep in touch with me. And if we can link up with the National Trust and look how we engage with families in particular about where they live, then that would be great.
I love collaboration. So I'm so excited when people want to meet up after we do sessions like this. And I do hope that you guys connect with each other. Jonny, I reached out to you and then I snatched the opportunity away. So I am going to go to you now. Do you want to give your feedback?
Yeah, I really love the idea. In fact, it was two ideas, wasn't it? Because the first one was about education and the second one was about linking that to decision making. I want to focus on the second bit because just because I think that's the most challenging. I think you shouldn't underestimate how challenging the kind of what sounds like a simple idea is, because bringing young people into decision-making processes and sort of turning upside down that kind of the age range of people who get to make important decisions that affect our built environment is actually requires everything to be done a little bit differently. I think it's exactly what is required, but I think it's very, very disruptive, and I think, you know, I really applaud the idea for that. I have a look at the Intergenerational Foundation, which is the charity that campaigns for fairness between generations, because they, I think it's something that they are interested in and should be more interested in, which is how decision makers involve children. And their research showed that the average age of planning committees and elected members across the country was around 60 and growing older. And I'm afraid that grim image that you showed of the elected members of one particular authority, the sad thing about that is that could pretty much have been any authority up and down the country. So we have people who are making our decisions who are kind of statistically the most likely to drive, the least likely to care about climate change. And it's all the wrong way around. We need to get young people making our decisions, in my view, and I really support that idea, because young people are the most likely to care about climate change. And you've made the kind of like the obvious but powerful point, which is that they have a direct sort of win or lose, you know, from decisions that are made today. In 10 and 20 years' time, those decisions are going to materially affect these young people's lives. So I think that it's something that needs to be done. How you go about doing it, I think, is a massive challenge. But I think hold on to that image of Greta Thunberg at the United Nations, because when she stood up in front of everyone and said, "The eyes of future generations are upon you," it wasn't just that she was saying something that was important in and of itself. It's that you could visibly see the impact that it had on other people who were used to making decisions in a very specific way and having conversations in a very specific way. It transformed their behavior as well. And I think if we can hold on to that idea that if you put young people in front of decision-making committees and actually they represent the voice of young people in an articulate and clear way, then it isn't just that you're hearing their voices, it's that it kind of forces an element of self-reflection on the people who are already elected to make these decisions. And from a developer's point of view, in nearly all planning committees that I've ever been in, have been kind of pretty gruesome affairs of people saying the same things, not really fully understanding the issues at hand, and not showing any real kind of conviction or compassion about the things that they have to make decisions about. And I think if you can get young people mobilized and part of that discussion in the way that you've described, then actually that transformative effect on the way that other people who are already involved in the process consider their responsibility and change their attitude towards it is really powerful. So it's something that I'm really interested in. Like as others have said, I think that it's connecting a lot of dots. There's lots of people who are involved in this sort of work. The other one I just quickly chuck in while I've got the moment is a not-for-profit called Block Builders, whose work is about using Minecraft and that the kids' game of Minecraft to visualize and encourage participation of young people in the built environment in schools. And they're worth speaking to because it's fun, but also they understand curriculum and the links, because that's basically how they work, is to go into schools and support this sort of conversation. Well worth talking to. But thanks so much for the really inspiring idea.
Brilliant. I also see there's another link shared in the chat by Akash of the Learning Through Landscape. So super interesting resources being shared in the chat and by all of you. Kat, I'm going to ask you to jump in next. I know Design Council has been involved in kind of education in schools, but perhaps just your feedback on Rebecca's idea would be great.
Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca. It was so lovely to see your idea and how you set it out. So clearly, obviously, knowing that you need to speak to a policymaker audience. So first thing to say is, Design Council has done lots in the past about schools. We've just republished a design toolkit for schools to take a kind of challenge and work it through a kind of discovery and experimentation process. So that's available. But what I would say, I mean, the first thing I want to say is I just love the way that you said we need to have a relationship with something and building that into the education process. And I think that could be equally relevant for adults. So the first thing we're going to do on our a new program we're doing for 15 councils around climate change. There's no design at all. It's just to get the people on the course to go and spend a day in nature, connecting with it, reflecting on it, because I think that relationship is, designing those interactions for those relationships is so key. In terms of education, I mean, we obviously are pushing for design education in schools, and the figures are terrible. So in 2010, in England, there were 255,000 people doing it at GCSE, and that went down to 114,000 in 2018. So there is kind of this almost like decimation of people doing design at school. So this is a really welcome addition to it. And actually, speaking to my colleague Sue, she said that there used to be lots of these types of courses funded by LAs, and she used to teach at one in school. So there is a kind of an old infrastructure there available. What I would say is think about how you might position it, because actually within the kind of the panel idea, there will be lots of ways in which people can learn the things that schools currently care about, as in maths, writing, and reading within that kind of planning thing. So I think kind of ways of also integrating it into the things that the kind of the system holds valuable while you're kind of transitioning, I think would be a really kind of tactical way. Things around long-term and future generations. I mean, in Wales, they've got the Future Generations Act. Some friends of mine have started up this really amazing project called the Long Time Project, which is supporting policymakers to think about designing for ancestors. And there's a load of really nice kind of activities you can do with policymakers to get them to think through that. But obviously having a group of young people in front of you is a really great way. And I think, if you think about, there are other bits of kind of infrastructure or kind of participatory democracy happening in local authorities now, and like citizens' assemblies, where they're trying to experiment with new types of ways of getting communities to shape their areas. And obviously the planning white paper coming up has got the potential for more of that. The last thing I'll say is when I saw the picture of all the kind of not very diverse members of the planning committee, I'd love to see the young people there, but also what would it look like to see a river in there, a tree in there, and a bird in there as well. So let's take this concept and even push it further.
Wow. Animals on the planning committee. I think that is radical. I am going to now finally go to you, Romy, and it would be great for you to take the mic.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep it short because we've got lots to move on to, and so many great things have been said already. We absolutely need this. I'm completely in agreement. We all talk a lot about how to bring young people in. We've got a real skills shortage in the landscape industry at the moment. Young people coming into landscape architecture are just dwindling away. We've always had a problem engaging and selling, and trying to bring children in as young as possible, I think, is absolutely what we have to do. And that will encourage diversity. That slide, let's just call it pale, male and stale. We need not just more young people, but more every kind of people. And attracting children, I think, will do that. There are some great initiatives already. The Green Planet with the RHS and Grow Wild from Kew Gardens. I've been involved in some of those in schools. I'm a Landscape Institute ambassador. I go and talk at careers fairs and all that kind of thing. But it always feels like we're just tinkering away at the edges. And I think this kind of overhaul actually is needed. And yes, my son did geography A-level, and absolutely all of the issues we're talking about are already covered in that alone. And just very briefly, yeah, something Jonny said, we need conviction and compassion. I think that's so true. I think that goes for everything we're talking about today and any other day. And, bringing this forward in different ways, including this one, is the answer for sure. And I probably would be disowned by my husband, but actually the one thing I wish I'd thought of was that slide on golf courses. God, couldn't we do better? My Radical Rethink submission would have been that if I'd thought about it. Let's transform them into something completely different. My colleagues also not going to be happy with me, but that was an incredible slide and I'd never thought about it. That was superb. So that will be for next year, maybe from me. But thank you, Rebecca. Absolutely brilliant. And I wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Do you want to come back on some of the comments there or give your feedback to the panel?
Yeah, just thank you so much. I've just written very speedily, tried to write as much as I could down there. There's a lot. I just wanted to ask Aminah actually about when you were working with children about trying to get them to think creatively. I did a bit of an experiment with some kids that I know just to see what they came up with. And I've just found that they were just sort of picking things that they already see, like, very generic kind of park or skate park. And I just wondered if you'd kind of encountered that, or if you had any tips for kind of drawing out sort of more imaginative ways of doing it.
That's a great question. I'm happy to answer. What I have tried to do in the curriculum to date is whenever presenting some kind of redesign idea is to leave it very open. So instead of saying you can pick from example A, B, or C, that it's carte blanche. So for example, when some kids in Bed-Stuy were going to redesign a local playground, there was a young kid, he was 5, I remember very clearly. I just gave them building materials, and he actually built a part where they were going to have the dogs play it together with the kids. Now, if that full idea can actually be realized or not, but I'm trying to get to the thinking of what he's thinking about and what these kids want. And so I think that the more open-ended that you can leave the project, then you leave yourself the seeds that can then maybe turn into something else further down the line. But I've also tried to work with them to make sure they're using empathy. And so to really understand how to read the cityscape, the landscape that they're working on. So for example, we may go out at 9 and then at 12 and then at 3, and for them to start learning how to read the city. What's happening at 9 that's not happening at 12? How many people are moving by? How is a space being used differently than another time? And so then it's them coming up together, the synapses are forming in their brain, and then they're coming to me with more of an ownership, more of this like kind of civic pride almost of being a young citizen, that this is what I think. And so those are things that have been helpful. And so hopefully that's helpful to you. But really do reach out if you think of other things further down the line.
Great. Yes, please all connect and we'll facilitate that if that's it. But it's time for us to go to our next idea. There's some amazing links in the chat as well. Please do stay on the chat. Keep sharing resources for the people in the audience too, because I'm sure there's lots of neurons firing out there. At least I hope so. So I'm going to give a big thank you to Rebecca for sharing your idea with us. Thank you to the feedback panel. Big